Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I wonder if, from your research, can you say anything about age profile and ethnic profile? You talk about targeting young people, and we've heard, since 2011 that many of the people involved are young, and also that they tend to be ethnic Kazakh. Is this true?
Yes, all of my respondents, they were Kazakh and ethnic Kazakh, and their middle age was 29, and according to officials, it's a typical social portrait for typical terrorists in Kazakhstan, and I think it's one of the it shows that the target group, yes, it's a youth, yeah, it's youngsters, but youngsters, it's a very big group, social group, and our counter-terrorism program defines only youth as a target, but it's necessary to target more accurately and to understand that not all of the youth is a risk group. It's just some, as I said, necessary to look at the districts where the level of marginalization because of social economic situation is more obvious, more expressed. Thank you for the question.
Thanks a lot for your presentation, but
can you switch on? Yeah, I can switch.
Thanks a lot for your presentation. Yeah, thanks a lot for your presentation, but can you really say that we can apply this research to every single country on the planet? Because, for example, if you take two of the most criminal countries on the planet, like Guatemala and Honduras, where the level of criminality is extremely high, but and most of them are young people, but at the same time they're not where they didn't feel like any social alienation, and they didn't become a terrorist. And if you look at the statistics, countries like other South American countries like Mexico or Brazil, very criminal countries, but at the same time these countries never had any terrorist attacks and never had any jihadist problems. So, and another question, for example, risk group approach, it's marginalized and criminalized, yes. But if you look at 9/11 problem, people who probably, we don't know, maybe it was done by Americans, maybe by Saudi Arabia, but people who did this, they were from Saudi Arabia. But at the same time, 10 out of 15 people from Saudi Arabia, they were extremely educated people, and Osama bin Laden was extremely educated people. And in this case, it's not really accurate to say that they were criminalized and marginalized youth.
Thank you for the question.
And the last thing, sorry. I mean, you said that social alienation leads to jihadist criminalized path, but at the same time, for example, Karl Marx would say that social alienation leads to revolution. If we can apply it to this.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. About Guatemala and Mexico. First, these countries don't have a Muslim majority, and I think it's very important to say. And about, I don't want to say that there is a very strong link between criminals and radical groups, because it's true that criminal world and criminal it's another criminal has another social structure and another roots, and radicals, it's another social problem, and I don't want to say that one leads to another. My key point that criminalization, the high level of criminalization, could be one of the drivers of radicalization into violent extremism. This criminalization increase the likelihood of radicalization when it connected with marginalization and with social alienation. When these three factors, these three elements come together, this serves as a fertile soil of for radical ideology. If you look at the last terroristic acts in Paris, for example, if you know, all of the members of this group, they were representatives of petty crime. And in Belgium, they lived in one of the most criminalized districts, and they adopted Islam also only 3 months earlier, or more or less, I don't remember. But all of them, they, as I said, they led a riotous life. They drink alcohol and took drugs, this connection is obvious in Europe too. You mentioned about 9/11 in New York, yes?
Yeah.
But it's this event happened 15 years ago, and we have another situation. And according to paper which prepared by international organization USA in 2008, they mentioned about the new trend when proponents of radicals, proponents of Al-Qaeda become, they fixed the growing number of people who had a criminal background and joined to Al-Qaeda. This was fixed in 2008. After this, there is a big discussion about connection between criminality and extremism. And I would like to say that Kazakhstan also, in Kazakhstan, manifested this problem. And if you look at in this angle, we we will be able to start a new approach to counter, not only talk about literacy, religious illiteracy, and to try to become all of our Kazakhstani people religious literal. It doesn't help. And in Afterbe we see that where a lot of money was spent to increase the level of religious literacy, it doesn't help.
Okay, Scott.
Okay, a couple of questions. At the beginning of the talk, you gave us some figures regarding the number of acts of terror that had taken place in Kazakhstan over the past few years. I think the highest figure was like 98 or something like that. Where did you get these numbers? And what definition of terrorism or acts of terror was used to compile these numbers? And the reason I ask is, it seems like when you broke it down for us, I was thinking about the graphs, a little bit more illustrative. When you broke it down for us in the type of attacks that were at issue here, most of them seem to be attacks on state authorities, police, intelligence services, prosecutors, judges, things like that. You did have one category for attacks on ordinary citizens, but we didn't get a number there. How many ordinary citizens, so not representatives of the state, have actually been targeted for killing by these supposed terrorists? So that's something I think that is very important, or actually fundamental, to lay out for us before we can get into a substantive discussion about exactly what we're talking about here and who these people are and what they're all about. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
The statistic which I presented is from official source, комитет по it's prosecutors internet source, prosecutors office internet source, комитет по правонарушениям. Yeah, it's general prosecutor statistics. It's open source where you can find any type of statistic on crime in Kazakhstan from the beginning of the 2000s. It's very useful, it's very good that we have this source. And I took the number of crimes and this statistic from the source, and terrorism, these categories from the law, and terrorism was defined as acts which I can't to repeat the whole definition of terrorism, but all these categories from the law, and these categories used to convict people who committed terroristic or radical acts. And about ordinary people, yes, you are right. Most of the terroristic acts were directed against law enforcement agencies, policemen, police officers, and we have only 3 or 4 cases when ordinary people were died, but they were died during the process. For example, in 2011, maybe you know, Tarazki terminator Maqsad Kariev, he attacked first again store, and during this attack he killed the ordinary person, the ordinary citizen, which stayed near this store, and he became maybe just
accidental victim.
Yeah, accidental victim.
Yeah, accidental, and I think that's important, because what we're talking about here is I think, overwhelmingly, or maybe even exclusively, attacks by certain individuals or groups on state authorities. And we're talking about these attacks in the context of terrorism, but we don't even have a definition of what that is, what the state authorities consider that to be. So I think it's very, very important that any study of this type start out on examining those premises. What exactly is defined as terrorism? How are these acts of violence directed at state authorities defined in terms of terrorism? And why is it that civilian populations are not targeted with these acts of terrorism? You referenced, for example, some of the attacks that recently took place in France and other places, and these were overwhelmingly attacks on innocent civilians, which is usually fundamental to a definition of terror. That doesn't seem to be the case here, so something interesting is going on. I think it bears investigation.
It's a very good point about the target of the attacks, terrorist attacks. I think the definition of terrorism which our authorities use is not not far from the definition which used in the international law. But I don't. I'd like to say that the main thing that the choice of the target for violent extremism, it's the next stage when the person is ready to violent act. For example, this person who radicalized under the influence of jihadism, they adopt the idea that Muslims have to struggle with kuffars. And definition of kuffars, it's very broad, and most of these respondents, they defined themselves who are the kuffars and why. And there is another connection between criminal world and radical groups, that we know who is the first enemy for any criminals. It's law enforcement and the police officers. So
I agree with you there, and that's why I'm wondering about whether these acts that we're talking about here are of a criminal nature or a terrorist nature. Mm-hmm. Social alienation and criminalization, in my opinion, would not normally be associated with a sudden conversion to religion, or religious extremism. That's sort of an idealistic position to take. Mm-hmm. Seems more like an instance, perhaps, of what somebody like Durkheim might define as anomie. And this might be the reason that these individuals get together and launch attacks on state authorities. But whether we can classify this as religious-based terrorist activity, it's questionable in my mind.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of questions.
But they frame it as jihad, which is a religious concept.
Anybody can say that. They can say that they're in.
But they don't say it so that they can,
I think sometimes they link with other groups.
Yeah, and plus there is a developed, if I can chip in, there is a big debate inside the jihadist community about that. Yeah, who the legitimate targets are. Yeah, and part of them are saying that innocent civilians shouldn't be, especially women, children, even if they're not Muslims. But there is a part who's saying that okay, they're all basically unbelievers and kuffar, how to call them. So it's fully legitimate, especially if they're not Muslims, but like French, American, whatever, because they carry the responsibility. So there is an ongoing debate. Yeah, I'm not sure that these people are exposed to these kind of debates. Yeah, and it seems to me that the phenomenon here is that this very kind of marginalized groups who are kind of somehow involved in that without much reading, thinking, and so on. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to say something, or let's move to?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Let's give other people opportunity. There was somebody on this side. Yeah, Nicolas. Yeah.
Thank you. In the case of Kazakhstan, have you found any link between Kazakh nationalism and jihadism as such, or the fact that everybody you interviewed were ethnic Kazakhs simply had to do with the fact that most Muslims in Kazakhstan are ethnic Kazakhs? Thank you.
No. Vice versa, when person adopts the radical ideology, he refuses his ethnic identity, and he starts to identify himself as a representative of Muslim world. And we have it's another situation when after adopting this radical option of ideology, of religion, this person, these people, they try to
break the ties.
break the ties with his relatives, which continue to follow Kazakh traditions, and because it's not it's tried to become it's controversial for literal Islam. It's a lot of traditional things, for example, which goes from pre-Islamski. Pre-Islam period, and I can say that there's no link between Kazakh nationalism, ethnic nationalism, and radicalism.
Thank you.
Okay, on this side. Okay, we're going back to this side. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And then you and then.
Thank you very much for your insight. And during the course of your presentation, I've noticed that you've been talking about the activities of criminal activities and how it links to this religious extremism. But what about the role of the actually local religious entities in these activities? I'm wondering about the religious representative of the mosque, like mullas, mullahs, and what role they're playing there, because as far as I know that our Hanafi Muslim tradition is so far from the jihad and Salafi Muslim traditions, and I'm wondering what is the source and who is the source actually of these extremist ideas, and how our local religious representatives actually, which role they are playing in this radicalization. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the question. All of our religious leaders or imams, they are all representatives of our spiritual board, духовное управление мусульман Казахстана. It's a structure which has a very strong connection with officials, with authorities, and all of our mosques are they present this organization, this structure. And the local leader, imam of local mosque, he propagate the traditional version of Islam, and all of those who are not agree with this traditional version of Islam, he become the not enemy, but he is not local imam. Try to
dissuade them from.
Dissuade his from the Salafi version of Islam, and this controversial position mostly. And we can see that local imams, they serve as the source of radicalization.
But whom would they listen to, these young people?
Yeah, these young people, mostly the leaders of these radical groups, they had a education, broad education. They are from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia. They went to these countries in 2000. From 2000 and 2011, where Kazakhstan doesn't try to control this process, and very large number of our youngsters, they had opportunity to have education, broad education from these countries, Islamic countries. And after when they come here to Kazakhstan, they try to, and their version of Islam was mostly they propagate Salafi version of Islam and radical ideology which they propagate. I think it's a consequence of their marginalization. After coming here into Kazakhstan, they can't find maybe the opportunity to socialize in this system, in these relations between local imams and the officials, and they find the followers and propagate radical ideology. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, thank you. Because it's also linked to the to the very source, like to the question before. Is it really a terrorism, and what the role the religious group actually plays there? And if it is, yep, I'm satisfied. So you believe that those ideas are foreign and it's brought here by the people who.
Yeah, mostly, and in some cases, for example, Kenkiak village, which I visited, they had one of the leaders with broad education. He lived in this village, but he was arrested and he died in prison. But in this Kenkiak village, he had his network. I don't know, but which this network. This network, after 3-4 years, they killed local police officers, and they killed by law enforcement after. I want to say that the leader was arrested, but network stayed in this village. And I think that they don't have great education, literacy in Islam, but they identify themselves with this network, with this person who was arrested as an extremist, and maybe they educated through books, through internet, I don't know, but the fact that local network, local person who identify themselves with leaders, they can be a source of radicalization, radical ideology.
Okay, yes. Yes.
Good evening. I would like to ask you about the measures which were taken by our government to prevent such attacks. You said that there was $1 billion to somehow prevent it. Could you elaborate on this point?
Thank you very much. Yes, this program was launched in 2012 after these terrorist attacks, 2013. Sorry, and our government, over the course of the last 4 years, our government spent a lot of money to prevent radicalization and terrorism. But I analyzed the budget of this program, and 90% of the money were spent to infrastructure, to create places for sport activities, culture activities for youth. But I couldn't find the evidences of these places, and we don't see a report on the money which we spend, and only a few percent of money was directed to producing video and texts, but the quality of these videos, these texts are very low, and so the program, I think, was not efficient and can't help to prevent radicalization.
So another billion in Spain. Yeah. Okay.
How can we change it?
To launch the next program.
And now in the parliament they're discussing the new law on combating extremism. And please follow, because it seems that another bunch of counterproductive measures will be adopted. Yeah, okay.
But don't you think that only money is not enough, to prevent terrorism? Because you need to have experience, to prevent things like terrorism or other criminal attacks. Because if you look at Russia or the United States of America, these countries basically get used to terrorist attacks, especially in previous years. But they have FSB and CIA, very huge corporations. Which basically can prevent terrorist attacks. But what about Kazakhstan? We don't have.
I think secret services, they are more or less effective because, as they said, they prevented several terroristic acts last 2 years. But when I'm talking about preventing radicalization, I focus on other kind of activities, not security forces activities, because I think it's another direction for analyzing for work, and it's another kind of work. And I offer to focus on preventing in terms of working with criminalized and marginalized youth, to offer them new kind of activities, not by using a lot of money. I think we are able to see the Kyrgyzstan experience, where the after OSH event in 2012, they started a new program with
in OSH 2010.
Sorry, 2010. They launched a special program with international organization, safety, I don't remember the name, but they organized at the local level the groups, people, and they organizing some interesting activities for local people, and they used international mentors who could crisis groups. They used the experience. I think we should to focus on this kind of activity.
Okay. First, I would have a few comments, about how efficient is FSB. For example, Russia is the #1 target in Europe for terrorist attacks, and more people died in Russia.
According to which statistics?
According to any international statistic, last 20 years. You can Google it first. And I'm not getting into debate. And for example, second, about, for example, Mexico, marginalization and so on. More people die in Mexico in gang wars, not than in Afghanistan. So when he mentions radicalization, it doesn't need to be jihadist or Gaza or something else. It could be Marxist terrorism, it could be racial terrorism, drug
Yes,
terrorism.
that's what I said about
Yes.
Marxist terrorists, because social alienation leads to revolution. Like, for example, in Ukraine or in the Soviet Union, by the way, in 1917.
But so, just the statistics. I don't know, more people died in Mexico than in Afghanistan, last 5 years, 10 years. If you want to see terror in Mexico, 3,000 people lose their heads, literally.
But they never classified it as a terrorism.
Doesn't matter. If you have a body without head, 20 people from the bridge, that
But
could be
here
terrorism.
we're talking about violent extremism, not about criminal attacks. It's a bit different.
No, so the extremism would have different levels. It's not all. But in a country with no Muslims, you wouldn't search for jihad. You search for something else. And when you move on, for example, the same gangs, Haitian or Mexican, move to US, there you see radicalization. There you see alienation.
It relates to drugs. It's nothing to do with jihadist.
And maybe jihadism is about drugs.
Not in this case.
Why not?
Because we are talking about religion.
We talk about Afghanistan and 80% of world heroin. Why not?
No, it's not heroin. It's opium, isn't it?
It's heroin.
Heroin is opiate. You know this, right?
It's debatable.
Okay, anyway, so talking about, I mean, you can Google now if you want about
I'm sorry, but I got a degree from Oxford University. So
That's great.
No, I'm just saying that first of
Congratulations.
all, according to your statistics, Russia is not number one target. The number one target is France. Well, just for now. Maybe in previous years.
I said 20 years. So don't take it.
No,
for
you
now.
said you said for now. You said
No, I
go
didn't
on
say
Google.
that. I said for 20 years. No, of course. Right. So there are statistics of how many people die. There are statistics of how many die. I don't know, in many other things. So how Russia is successful, it's a very debatable thing, right? Especially taking Caucasus and I don't know.
Yeah, but by the way, for example, even Barack Obama did not classify, like when, as you know, maybe 6 American policemen died, like in Chicago, like it doesn't matter where in the United States. But Barack Obama said that it's nothing to do with terrorism; it's just a criminal act. So that's what I'm saying. When you attack legal authorities, it's not terrorism.
Yes,
terrorism,
not always, of
terrorism.
course,
It's
yes.
only about ordinary citizens.
Yeah,
Are you
terrorism is
talking
when you have a
about
political message,
Yeah.
basically.
It's been classified as a terror
Okay,
act.
that's a very
Barack
interesting.
Obama didn't involve terrorism.
No,
Very
then
interesting
the next day it was like a terrorist.
About Mexico and Brazil, and I had a conversation with an international expert, and he said that there are cases where we have Brazilian followers of ISIS now. So we have these cases.
They were actually planning attack very recently. They caught, and during Olympic Games, they actually captured people there as well. Some of them were local, and some of them were Brazilians. But
well, I think we're talking about kind of some overlapping
Yeah,
phenomenon, because there is a phenomenon definitely of ISIS and people who had nothing to do with Islam, jihad, converting overnight. And there is an interesting study by Olivier Roy, the French political scientist, and he basically his argument is that it's a certain psychological type. It's basically people bordering on basically a bit psychopathic people, who kind of pick it up and try to go to ISIS. For me, an interesting question is whether Islam had to do anything with it. Yeah, and there is an interesting argument that Islam is undergoing an interesting process of democratization. Yeah, something that Christianity had when the Protestant, there was a Protestant when there was this Reformation, when to interpret the scripture you could do it yourself. You didn't have to listen to the higher authorities. Yeah, that's something that that we are having now. That's an argument put forward by Graham Fuller, an American scholar. Yeah. So basically, you don't have to listen to what Azhar people tell you. Yeah. You can kind of interpret yourself. Yeah. And there are people who started interpreting, and that's basically a big portion of all these Salafi schools, if you can call them that way. Another big issue is this criminalization, criminal subculture in our societies. Yeah. Okay, you can bring these ideologies from outside, but there is this criminal subculture that existed, probably will exist, and what are the factors that sort of kind of help it spread? Like I remember the street culture, even in Almaty there were these one school against another school, beating each other, talking in criminal language in Fenichka. Yeah, I'm sure we are all familiar with the criminal slang. Yeah, it's part of the Soviet culture in a way. And there is an argument that since in the Soviet Union so many people went through the prison, it became such part of the general culture. And it's not only, you can find it not only at the low level. Now maybe you heard about this Russian case when Zakharchenko
Was arrested.
Yeah, and they found a huge amount of money. Yeah, and there is an explanation that probably it was Общак. Yeah, so kind of these rules of the game, this criminal subculture is not, is found in different levels, even inside the law enforcement bodies. Yeah? So what is it? Yeah, we do see the kids who are 29, that basically these are post-independence kids. Yeah, but is it kind of continuation from the past, or we see something new with all these new ideological influences and?
I should mention that I interviewed certain prisoners, as I told, and it's not statistically approved, of course, but part of them who were more involved into criminal activity and criminal subculture, they tend to be more aggressive and tend to be more to act to violent extremism. They were closer to violent extremistic acts. And I think we should to analyze the criminal subculture as a driver to into violent extremism. It's clear that there are a lot of drivers for radicalization in general, meaning radicalization in minds, which could be not, which is not maybe a dangerous phenomenon. But when radicalization happens into violent extremism, when people decide to act using his radical ideas, and people who has criminal background because of his past, because of his grievances against law enforcement, it could be a factor which make faster the transformation from radicalization in mind, radicalization in action, in behavior. So I think it's the importance of this analyzing this problem using the criminal background. It is.
Okay, thank you very much, Serik, for a very interesting presentation and discussion. I think we're beginning to kind of scratch the surface. The problem is so big and so multifaceted.
We need another $1 billion.
We need another $1 billion coming to Serik and the group. So let's give a round of applause to our speakers.